Food, cars, housing, insurance, this, that, especially if you're self-employed, all of these things add up. And let me tell you, paying for health insurance out of pocket and not through a job and having them just kind of take it out of your paycheck sucks. All these expenses, all these things add up. And with recent inflation, it seems as if things are getting more and more expensive and it's harder and harder just to afford the basic necessities that maybe, in years past you could afford with closer to a minimum wage job. Maybe you look at trading as an outlet. Maybe you looked at it as a way to make some extra money to kind of get on top of your finances or to get to that next level of financial freedom that you maybe haven't had because you're relying upon your income and you're just paying the bills and you're maybe saving a little bit, but not as much as you would hope. And you're thinking like, if there's an extra way to make a few extra dollars, or dare I say a way to completely turn over my income to something that I can control, it's on my time and not somebody else's, that would be awesome. So as my brain works nowadays, it's like, how much do you really need to trade full time? Because I've been going through some exercises and some things of like, well, if you used a prop firm or if you had your own money, and we have some videos going back the past couple of weeks, and you can kind of see in those videos like where my mind was going. And I thought the next level would be, well, how much money does someone actually need if they truly wanted to go full time as like just trading, that's their only thing? And a side note here, it actually might not be as much money as you think. However, we should also set the framework because it is not easy to do. There are very, very few people that A, make consistent income via trading, and B, can consistently do that year over year over year to make enough money to pay for their entire lifestyle through trading alone. Most people do not do that. That's what I will definitely find, is that you have people who do trade, but they have other income streams, or they run a business, or they're an investor here. And so they have like other things going on, and maybe they've built up a pretty big nest egg. And so like they're cash flowing from dividends, etc. And like they have a separate account that they trade because like that's what they do with their time, but they don't necessarily need that to survive and live and rely upon only that money. So what I want to do is I want to start with a place in mind in the United States. I was scrolling through cost of living in different cities, and I just happened to stumble across Dallas, Texas. And the reason why I stumbled across Dallas, Texas is because in Dallas, it's like kind of in the middle in terms of like cities. It's like just north or just around the national average in the United States in terms of cost of living. And I felt like from a city perspective, it was a good place to be, kind of centralized in the middle of Texas. Yeah, it's southern United States, sure, but it's like in the middle of the United States. And it's a place that I lived pretty close by to. I lived in Austin, so I kind of have a feel for the area. Austin did get pretty expensive. I don't know if Dallas maybe was as expensive as Austin was when I was living there the past like 3 years, but it's going to be kind of close. So what I did was I went through and I found some average cost of living numbers. I'll pull them up on the screen here so you can see them. And then what I want to do is back our way into how much money we'd have to make, accounting for taxes, accounting for all the things that we need to account for when it comes to trading, like our own money, capital, all that stuff. So for a single person, what they say on Google is that it would be about $2,500 a month in terms of your average monthly expenses in Dallas, Texas. I personally was living in Austin, and I would say that that is low. So I'm going to bump it up $500 and say $3,000 a month in Dallas, Texas for a single person. Like that's what you need. Like you need that much money to survive, from transportation, for housing, etc. Now, of course, if you wanted to live in downtown, like where I lived in Austin, initially I lived in downtown and I moved during COVID. And so like rent was like around $2,100 or something like that per month. I think we had a deal, like a 8 weeks free deal, which made it a little bit cheaper. So it came out to be like $2,000 a month for this downtown, like overlooking 6th Street, overlooking West 6th, if you're familiar with the area. And it was sick, don't get me wrong, 19th floor, really nice, floor to ceiling windows, really nice. But that went to like from $22,000 a month to $25,000 to nearly $3,000 a month by the time I left. So that rent has skyrocketed. Obviously, you do not need to live in a place like that. I was splitting it with my girlfriend at the time. So it wasn't as expensive for me, but you get the point. So adding all these expenses up, we come out with $3,000 a month just to live. Now, that's not saying, oh, I'm going to be going out on the weekends and, going to the bars every day, or I'm going on, crazy trips, like eat, transport yourself to and from, where you got to be and all that stuff. In terms of a family of 4, they spit out about $6,000 a month I'm bumping that up to about $7,000 a month, just kind of keeping the same rough numbers as like that's what we would need to survive for a family of 4. As long as you're pulling $7,000 a month in husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, whoever you're doing, whatever you got going on. That's what Google plus my experience says. So now let's get into the fun part. We have the numbers we got a target. So we got to make that much money at least. Now, obviously, we'd all like to make more because we'd like to have extra spending money to invest, trips, travel, whatever. But we got to at least cover those needs. So let's talk about how we have to cover those needs and what we would legitimately or realistically need to be making from trading alone. Now, if you're looking for a place to trade specifically, that is where Iron Beam comes in, who is a sponsor of today's video.
Welcome to Iron Beam, the future of futures trading. With our cutting-edge chart trading feature and 300+ indicators, you can now trade directly off the chart anytime, anywhere. Delivering seamless trading across all platforms, the Iron Beam journey is supported by 24-hour trader support, low day trade margins, and no account minimums. Iron Beam brings the future into the present. Join now and augment your trading experience.
So now let's roll into the annual numbers and what we'd have to make annually to essentially cover our expenses. We need to have our top line income higher than what our expenses are like overall over the course of the year because there's taxes. So like when you're trading, you're not getting your taxes like taken out. Like if you go on do it, Iron Beam and you make money on, trading like the S&P futures this month, and you make some money trading, and now all of a sudden you have a couple $1,000s in gains, like that's profits in your account, but like no one took taxes out. So you have to make sure you're setting that money aside to pay the tax man come tax time. And there's quarterly taxes, there's obviously annual you can file, but like if you aren't thinking about that, like you need to be, because if let's say you make enough to cover your expenses through trading, that's awesome. Like most people will never do that, which is great. But now, did you account for taxes? Now you made enough, but now after taxes, you don't have enough. And you're like, oh shit, so I need to make more. So post-tax income, we need $36,000 for a single person, and we need $84,000 for a family of 4. Like post-tax income, which comes out to be after you account for federal income tax and state taxes, which in the state of Texas are not a thing, by the way. Perk of living in Texas, you do not pay state taxes. Where I am right now in Georgia, it pains me to say it's like over 5% state taxes, which sucks because I'm not used to it. Because like last year I was in Texas and I'm like, now I'm like, 5% more I got to pay the state. Oh, that's great. But if you do the math out, you need to make about $43,000 pre-tax. So let's say you have to make $43,000 a year trading, and then you have to make about $100,000 a year in terms of a family of 4 to cover your expenses post-tax. So 6 figures for a family of 4 and about $43K for a single person. Doesn't seem that crazy. Think about it. Like if you think about it in my view, like if you're 2 people, like if you're a family of 4 and 2 people work, like I don't think that's that crazy to do. And so you can split it. Obviously, like, are you both trading? No. But we're just going to simplify it and say that let's say the head of household XYZ person is making all the money. Obviously, it's not always that simple. Now, a single person, like this is where like, maybe like, if you're a single guy, like for example, like me, it's maybe not as much as I thought. Like now you get it. We'll now get into how much money we need in order to make that much money in a given year. It assumes that the single person is filing as single and the family of 4 is filing as married. No state income tax in Texas. It's also not accounting for additional write-offs, and it's not accounting for the 60-40 potential profit splits. If you trade futures, you could technically only get taxed 60% of your gains at long-term capital gains and 40% at short-term capital gains, which could save you a lot of money, could save you thousands of dollars, especially if you're the family of 4 looking to make over $100,000. It could save you a lot of money. So I'm not accounting for I'm not accounting for that in this example. But if you're trading stocks, you don't get that, doesn't apply. If you're trading options, doesn't apply, only for futures. And I think index options, it does apply as well. But that could change tax laws and stuff. Just something to think about, little nuances that could alter like the overall amounts. But these are just kind of a general, like we need to target these numbers for now. Okay, so targets are in mind. Now the realities of trading. It's obviously not a consistent thing. I think a lot of people get into the game and they think once I become profitable, now I, have this amazing income stream. I'll never lose. I'll always make money every month, every week. I'll have cash. It's fine. I mean, in my experience, it's not how it works. I'm telling you, like, and I've seen from people who are very, very successful, you will have drawdowns. You'll have months where you lose money. You'll have months where you don't make as much as you thought. We average these numbers out, and we have a target and like a goal. And like on average, I make XYZ per month or X percent. But it's not like it's not linear. It's not, oh, I just kind of, no, it's like this, and then hopefully you're making money net, but it's not as simple or clean, which is, again, why it's so challenging, not only because, like, obviously, like, it's tough to make money in the first place, but second, like, if you have fixed expenses, rent, mortgage, car, insurance, all these things, food, you might not make enough money on a given month to cover those things, so you have to have reserves, which then means you have to have more money to start with. So they say 6 months worth of expenses. I would say I would lean towards a little bit more personally if it was me, but they say that you want to have about 6 months worth of expenses. So that means for the single person, $18,000, and for the family of four, $42,000. That means we want to have that money ideally set aside in a separate account, earning like, ideally right now in this current higher than it's been interest rate environment, you can earn a couple percent per year with doing nothing. That money in some people's view could be utilized for, your trading account as your capital. Risky because what if you lose it, or, is that a risk? And that's something you have to make that determination, meaning is, as a single guy, is it better to take that 6 months of expenses, $18,000, put it in a separate account, have it set there, high interest, let it just kind of accrue interest, so I have it in case? Or does it make more sense for me to take that $18,000, put it in my trading account, so now I have a good base and I can trade larger size? You have to make that determination for yourself, but we're going to utilize that 6-month emergency fund almost as a baseline as well. So now we get to the next part of like our actual trading capital. So we'll stash that 6 months aside. Our trading capital, now you think, okay, well, I probably need, in order to make $100,000 a year, or to make, in the case of the single guy, $43,000 a year, well, I probably need to make a lot of money, right? Like I probably need to have a lot of money set aside, or do I? That's where the whole prop firm comes in, and I'm not going to, plug a prop firm. No, they're not the sponsor. Iron Beam is a sponsor, so if you want to trade your own funds, your own account, Iron Beam, link down below, is the place for you. But that said, it is an interesting and worthwhile conversation to have when we talk about prop firms. If you were to refer back to our video on essentially are prop firms worth it and how much money you need to trade your own, we made some general assumptions in there, and then we came to some conclusions that around $15,000 would be the minimum amount of money you would need to make about $3,000 a month if you had a solid system and were trading your own capital. But $500 roughly could buy you a $100,000 prop firm account, which then we assumed similar trading stats would potentially allow you to make around $3,000 a month if you were to refer back to the data and how we calculated that, $3,000 a month trading with a $100,000 account. So that technically only costed you $500, and you're not tying up all this capital. Therefore, if you are going the prop firm route, which I will calculate the own capital route in a second, you would need approximately $18,000 as a single guy in reserves, your emergency fund, and then you need about $750 roughly, assuming the average prop firm, cost right now, that at least I was looking around at, or to buy the account size, or size is if you can get 2 accounts, have a trade copy or whatever, to essentially allow you to make enough money to cover your expenses and make that $43,000 a year in income. So it would require you just under $19,000 of your own capital. Like, you need to have set aside to be able to, like, okay, I could do this on my own if I had a system that was making me consistent money. Based off the assumptions that I had in the other video in terms of the system, they could be conservative, they could be aggressive. It just depends upon your stats, where you're at, all that. So I'd recommend going back to that video and checking out like how he came to this assumption, what our stats were, win rate, average risk reward, and drawdown and stuff. That would be a good place to start if you're confused. But like, we came out to that assumption, like roughly, like that's what we would need. So $19K. Family of 4, obviously we need more money, but if we go the prop firm route, you can probably get access to enough funding with about $1,500. You can get access to enough funding if you're trading mostly futures and Forex. There's not a lot of stock options out there in terms of accounts. There are some that are a bit more expensive and not as nice in terms of your profit splits. But if you want to go that route, maybe add on an extra $1,000. It would cost you $42,000 for your emergency fund, and then it would cost you about $1,500 in prop firm accounts to be able to get enough money to trade with enough size to make enough money to make what you need to make $100,000 a year. If, again, you assumed the same statistics that we had in the prior video. In terms of your personal capital, where it gets a little more interesting, so we have our $18,000 in reserves. I calculated that about $18,000 would be enough for you to be able to make $43,000-ish a year with those stats. So $18,000 capital, $18,000 emergency fund. That would be enough, which is $38,000. Why am I saying 38? That's not 38. It's $36,000. I can't do math. $36,000. Now, because $18,000 of reserves also happens to be the same amount that you would roughly need for you to be able to size appropriately, you could say maybe you need $20K, and if you utilize your reserves as your trading capital, you could do it. So you could do it for decently less if you utilized your emergency fund as your trading capital in your account. It's just a lot more risky. For a family of four, probably you don't want to take on that risk. As a single guy, maybe you could, because who cares? But a family of four, probably don't want to take on that risk. So you need $42,000 in reserves and about $45,000 I've calculated in terms of trading capital in order to be able to get enough size, enough leverage, etc., to trade your own funds and make up to $100,000 a year. Now, you say to yourself, holy shit, if that's the case, that means you are making like a lot, like 200% on your account. Yes and no. Because of leverage and because of futures and because what we can do with money, we're able to take that $45,000 of capital, and then that's able to give us more leverage, essentially. So yes, but in terms of like our buying power is more than maybe that. So I hear where you're coming from, but at the same time, I don't think that there are a lot of people out there who are setting aside $500,000 of their own capital and then trading super conservatively and making a couple percent per year. To be like, that's not very common. Most people will set aside less money and just utilize leverage, utilize some margin so that they can trade freely with a lot of size, and it's the same kind of thing. It's all relative. So the family of four, you need about $87,000 per those calculations, $87,000 of upfront money roughly to be able to have your own capital and the emergency fund. Like I said before, you technically could do this with a lot less if you're willing to utilize some of that emergency fund as your capital. But again, that's risky. With a family to feed, even more risky. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I thought these were interesting calculations and something to think about. And I think they definitely appeal much more to the single guy or person who doesn't have a lot of responsibilities, has maybe lower expenses, and could take, 6 months to give it a shot if they have the capital and have the trading data behind them. Maybe you can do it. I find that you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself when you go this route, and so having other income would be awesome. Personally, in my own experience, I do not utilize trading income to pay the bills necessarily, but I have been a lot more consistent in my own trading or the past 2 years when I was making more money elsewhere and I didn't have the stress or the thought of oh man, I want this to pay for my XYZ, or I need this to pay for XYZ. It makes it a lot easier. You can approach the charts, approach your strategy with a lot more ease, and then the emotions don't really eat away and cause you to do things that maybe you wouldn't do if you were thinking clearly. If you want to see that video on if prop firms are worth it and how much capital you would need yourself, I'll link it up here on the screen. Peace, love, and happy trading.